Już jest?
Ladies and gentlemen, I would like to welcome all of you in Karma Deciencieli, and special welcome to Venerable Dr. Henk Schur, to Lama Rinchen and Wojciech Czypicki, prezes Fundacji Theravada Polska. Our noble guest is very well known by all of you. Don't need any presentation. Lama Rinchen is the Lama from the Bęczyn branch of the monastery in Poland, in Grabnik. Is a principal Lama and one of the most experienced Buddhist person in Poland, and Wojciech Czypicki is the chairman of the Theravada Foundation Poland. My name is Tomasz. I am the person responsible for this place, for Karma Deciencieli. And the main issue gather us here today is the discussion about the Buddhism in a present world, and I will try my best to run this discussion. I'm very happy that we have such a noble guest, and we have three questions. The main question we would like to discuss. The first question is beyond mindfulness, means the practice in a daily life. Second is three aspects of existence: dukkha, anatta, and anicca, and influence of these three into the environment. And the third one is the role of Buddhism as a model for sustainable development in 21st century. Means influence of the Buddha Dharma for the society. And I hope our guests will relate to these questions, and later on we have also a chance to ask the questions. Okay? If we can start, I would like to ask first Venerable Dr. Henk Schur about introduction, about the first words in this topic.
Could I invite everybody to put your palms together? If you're willing to do that. Let's do some invoking of the Buddha's presence. I'll give you a line and you give it back. Namo tassa, Namo tassa, bhagavato, arahato, samma sambuddhassa, homage to the blessed, noble, and perfectly enlightened one. Namo sadanto, sucedoye, oraburi, sammya sambudoshe. Okay. Supreme and wondrous Dharma, subtle and profound, rarely is encountered, even in a million eons. But now we see and hear it and accept it reverently. May we truly understand the Buddha's actual meaning. So, Lama Rinchen, Wojciech, and Thomas, thank you for inviting me. This is an honor for me to be here, and also I'd like to acknowledge our 6 Dharma masters from the city of 10,000 Buddhas who are here. Did we count up the precept years? We should get a total. There's a lot of years in robes in our delegation. Our Master Hong Jiang, who is here, and in the back, Jin Xiaoshi sitting in the back there, and Jin Hosher is resting, and Jin Wei, our brand new monk, he barely counts. He's 1 month. We have a 1 month late because of so. So then lots of laity who've come from all over the world, most of them from California, but some from France, and some from Germany, and some from Palanitsa, who are here at the Dharma Center to look into the Buddha's wisdom. And when we were planning this, but by the way, our translator is still on the way, so Jin Weisher is on the phone getting our translator here. So please, the Polish speakers, if you could, just mention his name and here he is. Great. So when we were planning, we were thinking of what our topic should be, and these 3 questions came up as good starting places, but we could pick any dozen questions, and I think the conversation would be as rich. So, are you happy, Yatsik? Are you
Yes,
good there?
I'm all set.
Good. Okay. So those, how are we going to? Are we giving headsets to people who need to hear Polish, or how are we doing it? Our translator has a headset on, so perhaps. How are we doing it? Because we have a need here in the front.
Ci, którzy potrzebują słuchawki, to proszę o zgłoszenie się do Irka i Irek da słuchawki.
Może podnoszą rękę. To
Może bardzo proszę o podniesienie ręki. Osoby, które potrzebują słuchawki. 1, 2, 3, 4.
W słuchawkach będzie polski czas.
W słuchawkach będzie język polski. Those who need translation. Okay. Good.
That's a really good.
6 people.
Yeah. Good. Now, how many need Vietnamese translation? Hands up. 有多少人需要听中文？请举手。We have some need for Mandarin here. Okay, more headsets, more translators. 哎呀，可能要听中文的人，今天要忍耐一点啊。或者请哪一位帮忙？Okay. So we'll get going just while we're adjusting our technology here, and the first topic came up about mindfulness because I'm not sure about Poland. My guess is it's just exactly the same. Mindfulness is the buzzword of the day. Mindfulness is on the cover of Time magazine. You know. Mindfulness is in the boardroom at Apple Computer and Google. Mindfulness is in the U.S. military where they train snipers. Mindfulness is in the U.S. Air Force where they train pilots. Mindfulness is in prisons where they do time and they do vipassana. You know. So this is a genuine contribution from the West to the Buddhist world, you could say. This is a force that is shaping culture. Now, the question is, how is it shaping it, and what is mindfulness? You know, so that's the questions that probably a deeper study would look at those questions first. But no one can doubt that mindfulness began with a form of Buddhism imported from the Theravada tradition. in Thailand, where Jack Kornfield and Joseph Goldstein learned by being left home disciples of Ajahn Chah, the Venerable Ajahn Chah, came back to America disrobed and stripped out the religious elements from their Buddhist practice, but kept the meditation discipline alive and added Western psychology. Presto, we have mindfulness. There's another form that also came at the same time, which was Goenka based, which is largely from Mahasi Sayadaw, the Burmese tradition. So both these strains of Buddhist practice came to the West and became mindfulness. It is currently even hotter than yoga. And yoga is being practiced in, I don't know about Poland, but the United States, by tens of millions of people are practicing yoga every day as part of their daily regimen, you know. And mindfulness has the potential to go further because you don't have to put on your leotard and you don't have to stretch. You can sit in your chair in your carrel in Apple, Google, and do your work. You can sit in the cockpit of your jet and still practice mindfulness. So that's what we're talking about when we're talking about mindfulness, is this new Western form of Buddhist practice that has gone deep into the fabric of the West. All right, so we'll see what happens to mindfulness in 10 years, 20 years, 30 years. How will it continue to change? There are many, many critics of mindfulness. Here I was in Sydney, Australia in December, in June this year, and a journalist from ABC, the Australian Buddhist Corporation. I said that wrong. Australian Broadcasting Corporation. That's funny. Australian Buddhist Corporation? Not yet. Australian Broadcasting Corporation was in a room with a microphone and saying, now, I have been on a 9-month investigation of mindfulness as a phenomenon in Australia. My question to you as a Buddhist monk is, do you think when the military creates mindful snipers whose job is to kill, has that harmed the intention of the Buddha? The original intention of the Buddha. Has mindfulness gone astray, and should we stop it now because we're teaching snipers how to be better killers through mindfulness? Serious question. And here I am on the radio talking about that. So you know that this has gone into the fabric when such a question could arise. So our topic that we came up with tonight, just to propose and to talk to, is beyond mindfulness. It's an interaction of something that is identified with being Buddhist, meditation, and Western culture. How are they going to interact? How are they going to develop and change as the months go by and people meditate more, as people become more mindful? So, if you'll accept that as a framing of the question, what is mindfulness? And at some point, you stand up from where you've been sitting, and you need to go out into the world and interact with your family, with your job, with your students, with your teachers, with your pets, with your possessions. How is mindfulness going to inform your behavior? That's kind of the question. And what kind of a world does mindfulness enter is one question. For example, people come to me and say, you know, can we get a headset here for Slavic?
We have some problems now with the system, so the people gather.
Okay, sorry. Do you want to hear? Okay. I'll speak slowly. Okay. So people come to me and say, it's not my problem, but my wife has depression. She's depressed. Can Buddhism help? What can you teach me that will help my wife? And that's one aspect of the culture that mindfulness is entering. Other people have hope that meditators might learn to use drugs less if they practice mindfulness more. My home state of California has legalized marijuana. Marijuana industry in California is huge. Before the actual bill begins, the build-up, the growing, the warehouses for the marijuana that is grown is vast in California. And if you're a mindfulness meditator, can you resist the pull of marijuana as a recreational drug? We don't know yet in California. So this is the kind of world that mindfulness is entering. America politically is polarized now. There's a gap where people are not talking, they're only shouting at each other. In some cases, beating each other. So mindfulness has come into the culture at a critical time. People are depressed. Their minds are, there's a mental illness that is widespread. Even people at their workplace are depressed. There's a time when people are reaching for drugs. Opioid epidemic, they call it, which is serious social impact of people reaching for something to block their minds. Marijuana is legal. And it's a time when religion is under attack everywhere. People, I think, by and large, have questions whether religion can actually answer, can speak to the polarization in the country. Churches have lost their influence. You think of the important religious leaders, the Pope, His Holiness. There aren't many others. So, here's mindfulness. People meditate. How many people are doing some form of meditation or mindfulness? Hands? Okay. Pretty much everybody in the room. How many people have colleagues at work or brothers and sisters who have gone to mindfulness recently to investigate this new form? Yeah, who are trying it out, who go through the door of mindfulness into this bigger world. Okay, good. Yeah. So, clearly, something is happening here, right? So, anyway, that's my opening, and I would like to ask Lama Rinchen to please give a perspective from what he sees, and develop what I suggested or go into it.
Well, I don't think I could say something new, because first of all, I totally agree with you. What I see, what I experience with my friends, people I know, is very similar. And also recently in our meetings and Dharma talks, I used to put attention of the people to not to overestimate the techniques, different Buddhist techniques. Mindfulness is one of them, but we have any kind of practices. But first to ask actually, why do we need it for? From the perspective of Tibetan Buddhism, first we say always first important is to have a right view, which understand view means understanding my situation now, what is the nature of the world, what is the nature of myself, what is the nature of the relation between me and the external world, and to understand what is the goal which I want to achieve. And in fact, that's true. There is a number of people who would like to use the Buddhist practices, I call it just Buddhist techniques, Some of them, because I want to get a little more calm, or because I want to get rid of this and that sickness, because I want to be more happy. But also already within those who identify themselves as a Buddhists, there is also many those who supposedly have the Buddhist view, not just only want to achieve like temporary goal. Many of them, especially, I mean, I can talk only about the Tibetan tradition because this one I know. Many of them, they consider different various Buddhas as a kind of, I don't know, powerful gods which are going to help them. Like, for example, they're asking, I didn't learn properly, but I need to pass the exam. Please give me blessing of the Manjushri Buddha, then I can pass the exam. Or to which Buddha I should pray to succeed in my business. So, of course, when I look to the scriptures, I see that Buddha was actually teaching to the three kinds of disciples. At least in Tibetan we call it like Chechung Timung, great vehicle, which is of course the Mahayana vehicle where we practice Dharma, because we are tired, we cannot stand anymore the suffering of all the other sentient beings. Then what we call the small vehicle is we cannot bear anymore our own suffering. But this was in Tibetan we call Timongim, is like very ordinary path, is those who want to achieve some better state in samsara. Maybe in the old time it was like better rebirth, but now many Westerners, they say, I am Buddhist, I believe reincarnation, but actually they never, when they take any decision, they never think what will be results in future lives. They only look for results in this very life, in a few years what I can achieve. And then this is like this ordinary, those who have like in the worldly life, the hope to make their own situation better. And what I see from the sutras, Buddha didn't expel these people, didn't say, go away, you are bad, because you don't have the high motivation. Of course he was teaching, but basically what was teaching? If we look to the scripture, he wasn't teaching any like high meditation, mindfulness, but mainly teaching about the cause and effect.
Correct.
Mainly, you want less suffering, commit less negativities. You want more happiness, be more proper. Proper conduct. But the problem with the nowadays world is that everything, it goes so fast that we expect very fast results, very quick results. If we, for example, practice Dharma for a few years and there is no visible results, I am not shining light, I didn't become kind of very special, respected by everybody person, it means, this practice is not working. Generally, when we speak about this karma, sorry to take so much time, but generally when we speak about the karma, I think the biggest misunderstanding is from at least our Western perspective or European people, I've never been over the sea, is that we don't have this kind of mental patience to look for the results which will come long time after. We look only for the immediate results. I see it from my own experience. For example, I know very clearly, and I make this experience hundreds of times. If I eat very sweet cookie with a cream, if I eat, after half an hour, after 1 hour, I have headache. This is proved by experience.
How about chocolate?
Same was.
Sorry.
But every time he gives me something sweet, I try to foolish myself. Maybe this time it will not work. Maybe I can cheat the cause and result. If the cause and the result would be just immediately, I put this to my mouth, there is a pain. I take it out, no pain. Of course, if I put my finger to my eye, it pains, it brings pain, I take finger out. Exactly the same, if we would see results, we would never commit any negativity. The same applies like for environment. If people would see you know, immediately, what is the result of throwing garbage in the wrong place? Immediately they have some skin sickness. They would never do that. But we foolish ourselves because we hope, this time it will not work like that.
Nobody's looking.
Yeah, nobody's looking. Mr. Karma does not see it, or maybe I can cheat him. But there's no Mr. Karma, no Lord Karma. So, mainly, basically, what I mean, at least in our I mean, those who I know, Buddhist societies, maybe sometimes we underestimate to talk about why do we do that, what is our aim, what we are ready to give up, what we want to achieve, and too much focusing on the techniques. And this is exactly the same like what you said, using these Buddhist techniques out of context, just to fulfill like worldly purpose, killing someone and so on, or squeeze or more money from my workers if I give them my mindfulness course. So in this respect, I totally agree with you that the technique itself, it would be like, I don't know, taking from Catholics the technique of communion. If I eat this good bread, I feel nice. If it is without belief in Jesus Christ and so on, doesn't make much sense. The same mindfulness is just a tool. Like knife we can use to cut some bread and give this bread to the poor people, and we can use this knife to kill someone. Technique can be used by snipers, by holy Buddhist masters. So that's it.
Thank you very much for introduction to the topic. I certainly agree with both the Venerable and Lama. It is important to remember at what time actually we have this rise of mindfulness. It's not as powerful as in USA. We don't have mindfulness on the cover of Prost or Newsweek, but we do see more and more people taking the courses and trying to elevate stress they have at work, at home, with mindfulness or with some meditation techniques. And I certainly agree that mindfulness is just a technique. It's one part of Eightfold Path, and leaving out all the rest and leaving ethics away, throwing wisdom away is not giving good results. But still, even people who just use mindfulness, they remove some suffering. So from that point of view, I think it's very positive, and some of those people will just feel a little bit better and then maybe forget about mindfulness, forget about Buddha's words. Some may see, okay, if this helps me, then maybe I should take it one step further and join some meditation group and do something more. So I do agree that this is just a very limited use, and it might be morally go in a wrong way, but it does help people. So actually, I'm one of those employers who invited people working in my company to try out mindfulness. I hope I didn't do it for more profits. I hope that this was generally to help them alleviate stress, because there is always some stress at work.
I have a short question, because it seems for me that we didn't make a clear definition what we mean by the English, American one, word mindfulness, because you mentioned it's part of the Eightfold Noble Path, and I understood from your speech it's more like Vipassana, so it's not the same actually, right? Then what is there any clear definition of mindfulness, or it's...
I'll add a...
One mic is enough?
This one went dead. I'll add a third one. In the Chinese, the word that, when you translate mindfulness in Chinese, it's hard to translate what the mindfulness Inc., mindfulness industry, calls mindfulness, which is essentially a technique of calming the mind and finding peace. You know, in Chinese you say nian, and it means, it's the same word to remember. And usually it involves a method connected to the Pure Land practice, where you are mindful of the Buddha. And even the Chan school says there's, in our tradition of the Chan school, there is one meditation topic that is taught universally. The one is called a Huatou, it's the word head meditation topic, and it's Nian Fo Shi Shui, who is mindful of the Buddha. And that's Mu for Zen people. That's Mu all day long. We don't do Mu, Wu in Chinese. We go Nian Fo Shi Shui, or Shui Hu. Who is mindful? Who is in there chasing your squirrel cage, you know, chasing your tail? So that's a third aspect, which is essentially staying on the topic. Walking, standing, sitting, lying down, you're always asking yourself, who is in there? Who is so busy? You know? So that's a third aspect. And yes, we didn't define it because why? It's a moving target right now. Mostly I think it's taught as yoga. You know, it's learn this, it'll make your day go better. And it's also given as a feel good. You know, it's an analgesic. So it's meant to end. So my answer to the interviewer in Australia was, don't be afraid that somehow the Army's, military's use of mindfulness is going to harm Buddhism. I would propose to you that once you, if I were to give a fourth definition of mindfulness, it's this. It's just that. Instead of on high, it's looking for God. Okay, that, the outward, is because the Creator is out there and I am a creature, and all theistic religions have the power source out there. Buddhism, among the world's major religions, is one of the very few that says the power source is here. So it's that, just that, you know, don't look there, look here. And when you look here, we have a phrase, you have a tiger by the tail. What if you teach a sniper to look within and start to listen, and to observe rising, falling of thoughts, the Vipassana method, rising, falling. What if he or she does that for 6 months, 1 year, 18 months, and then the captain says, fire, kill him. And the soldier says, you know, Captain, I've been looking at my mind, and I don't think I want to kill anymore. We're connected. That'd be like killing myself. Tiger by the tail. The power of that, just that simple, the Chinese call it huang, looking within, can change everything. It changes your perspective once you tune into what's really going on. And what if the snipers develop compassion along with their wisdom? That's a problem for the military, right?
Okay, thank you very much for all of you for this introduction and comments. If I may say a few words also about mindfulness. As a person who with friends created in 2008 the Polish Mindfulness Association, not being actively present in this movement but still was like a co-founder, there is a few aspects already mentioned, like alleviating suffering. There is many fields in the society where Buddha Dharma don't even touch. We don't have like ability capability, like in Poland, to go to many hospitals, to the many prisons. We don't have manpowers properly trained to support children, sick people in different kind of hospitals, oncologically ill, and so on. And mindfulness, in his way, can reach these places, also as a part of the medicine, part of psychology, and definitely doing good job. And that's the first. Second, if mindfulness became the part of the science of psychology, it will be under the process of scientific, some kind of development. And I trust that science will review the results also, and this kind of results can be like the methods to working more and more efficiently with the patients. The third element is, I guess the problem is when we expect from mindfulness the full path to awakening. This is an unrealistic expectation. But if there is like a certain part, intro, the beginning, it can be very, very positive and supportive also for the Buddha Dharma. Because those people who enter in this kind of practices and feel some kind of relief from suffering, most probably will be looking for the further steps. And the main problem I see in relation to mindfulness is unrealistic declaration of the teachers that they can really help totally alleviate suffering, which is rather impossible. But we should also remember that, like in Buddha Dharma, in Tibetan tradition, mindfulness practices related to the body is equal to first noble truth. Related to the emotion is equal to the second noble truth, the source of suffering. Mindfulness related to mind, the mind nature, is the third noble truth, and mindfulness related to the appearances is the way, the fourth noble truth. This case depends how the mindfulness is presented, religion or non-religion way. It definitely depends on the people who promoting and teaching them mindfulness. That's the main issue.
Yes. Let me respond. But what I heard you say is that it can be the gateway. And for the prince Siddhartha, all it took was a vision, something that he saw at the gates to get him going. How much more if he had had, sessions of mindfulness training, how much more quickly would he have awakened. So yeah, it doesn't take much.
Okay. Do you have any question? We have the time for 1, 2, maybe 3 questions from the audience related to the issue of mindfulness and the role of mindfulness in a present society. Please feel free.
Here we go.
Just a moment to the mic.
Nie usłyszałem jedynie słowa cierpliwość, która bardzo jest pomocna w praktyce. Ja staram się tak jak potrafię od 35 lat i zauważam dużo głębokich spraw związanych właśnie z cierpliwością, bo bez niej to już dawno bym chyba zrezygnował. Ale ona mi pozwala właśnie na kontynuowanie i poznawanie głębokich praw, nad którymi nigdy przedtem nie miałem zielonego pojęcia, że coś takiego istnieje w moim umyśle, który tak naprawdę szczerze jest przyszłym Buddą. Każdy z nas, tak jak ja rozumiem Dharmę Buddy, jest przyszłym Buddą. Ja oczywiście też. I to ode mnie zależy, ile włożę w to serca, cierpliwości. No i tak to wygląda według mnie.
So one thing I didn't hear so much about here was
To the mic,
patience.
do mikrofonu.
This small word patience, because I've been practicing the Dharma for 35 years, and without this element of patience, I would get nowhere. I wouldn't be here today, and I wouldn't be able to penetrate my mind and discover really deep truths, which I had no idea about before, and I wouldn't understand that I am the future Buddha, like each one of us is. So I think this persistence and patience in practice is something that's really indispensable, it's really needed.
Hallelujah.
Okay, next question.
Next question.
Następne pytanie.
Shita, what's happening to mindfulness in India?
Co się dzieje z uważnością w Indiach?
The second question came from Shita Sanghi.
So it's interesting, in the land of where Buddha's work started, it's believed that it's coming a full circle right now where it's kind of entering the mainstream. People are using it for all kinds of, in sports, in the army as you mentioned, in corporates. And a lot of, actually in India, a lot of the medical, psychological, all of them are now arriving at this understanding that where the mind over matter, where really you can, have, mindfulness is very important, and it's a very interesting time. A lot of our friends, as you mentioned, family and friends, everyone keeps going for these retreats, programs. The conversation now is mainstream. It's not something that only people who left home or had an interest, but it's a dinner table conversation.
Could I ask further, what was the impact of Kiran Bedi's taking it into Tihar jail, doing time, doing Vipassana? That made huge ripples in America. Was it the same? In India, was it known as well as?
It's extremely well known. Where this, one of the largest prisons of Asia is called Tihar jail. It's close to Delhi, and the most violent criminals in India are put there. So there's this inspector who was in charge of the warden. She actually introduced Vipassana training into the prison, and now that program has become so well known that it's now exported to other countries as a way of reforming the system. So, yeah, it's in fact trickled down to many other prisons now. A few friends of ours go to the local. It's also gone to, where you put the under 18, the juvenile prison system. So it's even entering those systems. In fact, they started a program to take this to schools now, where every school will start with a 10-minute silence time in public schools.
Could we keep that topic on the table for just a little longer? Because I would like, before we move on to the next one, there are 2 points I would like to make. One is that Shital mentioned, to my mind, the most significant connection with let's not even say Western, with modern culture. If India is Western, then it's Western, it's modern. The most important impact of mindfulness is called mindful classrooms. And it's happening not just in California, which is kind of always on the edge of something new, but it's happening in rural Australia, where the Catholic Church, interestingly, in Australia, took their version of mindfulness, they call it Christian contemplation, into the classrooms of indigenous Australians. and found that kids who came from alcoholic families straightened up and said, I'm not that. And the teachers got behind it and starting to meditate. So that's a huge, huge impact on children who, you know, how do you expect a third grader to sit still? But they do. They like that 10 minutes in the morning because it helps them learn to control their feelings that otherwise are just swirling, right? That's one. The other comment that I wanted to point to is if before mindfulness was exported to contemporary culture, if you wanted to learn meditation, pretty much you had to learn it from someone who learned it from someone who learned it from someone. Mostly there was still a Buddhist expert in the room, or a meditative expert. And you knew that what you learned had to do something with that person who was sitting, you know, who had been steeped in something, who had been trained in something. And one of the aspects of mindfulness that you get if you go in Manhattan, New York City, to, you know, hit Mindful Center 2.0 and pay the instructor, who is basically a yoga teacher, your $150 for, you know, a week of lessons. You know that everybody in the classroom is equal. You've hired that expert to teach you. Mindfulness comes without the structure of tradition or transmission or connection. And somehow in America, that's just fine. In Europe, that's just fine. We've given up the idea of spiritual authority when we learn mindfulness. Is that a good thing? Is that a bad thing? What's the impact of having it be so radically horizontal, radically democratic? Oh, I do mindfulness. Yeah, I learned how, and I do it every morning. That should be a good thing, right? Is it? Is there anything lost when we democratize it to the point where it's a mass movement? Maybe that's fine. I don't know, but I'm curious because this is new. We haven't had meditation without, I don't want to say verticality, but at least some sense of, here is, I don't even have words for it, that you learn it from a tradition, you learn it from a teacher, you learn it with the Shila and the Prajna intact. Essentially now we're transmitting Samadhi without the Shila, without the Prajna. Matter? Do we care?
Well, I cannot say much about it because, in fact, I don't know how this program really works for the people who has nothing to do with the Buddhist tradition. I don't have experience, so I might only think that, first of all, when I was saying that it is kind of deprived of the Buddhist view, that it is just a tool, I don't mean that others should not use that. If some people misuse a knife for killing others, it does not mean that knife is bad and we should not give knife to others. And what I used to joke that Buddha didn't pay for copyright for mindfulness and meditation, so other people are allowed to use that. If it helps them, great.
Public domain.
But my question is, if it goes like that, so always the basic question, why do we do it for? If by mindfulness we have more like self-control and more kind of strength to do something, so maybe in some cases it is just to gain more power to control others. For example, by my experience, I know some people who were real experts of psychotherapy, and I've seen how these people use in everyday life, in the not very noble way, their qualities, just to have power to control people. This is the experience. So my question is, if people come with just ordinary egoistic motivations and they get the tool of become like stronger personality, have more power, will it go? I don't know. I just think, will it go to the direction that they really, oh, by mindfulness they learn, oh, I should be less egoistic, I should more care for others? Or is it only, you know, just to gain some strength to realize my kind of egoistic goals? So this I don't know.
I hope we can spend another while discussing mindfulness, because I just remembered what Venerable mentioned before we started discussion, and this was about the present time of our mobile phones, of our decreasing attention spans. So there was actually a study done in America. How long does we, on average, pay attention to one thing? And it turns out it's on average 8 seconds. 8 seconds. And this study was done also 7 years earlier.
Excuse me, what were we talking about?
And this study was done 7 years earlier, before the rise of smartphones, and this was, by then it was actually 12 seconds. So it's falling rapidly, and we tend to forget that what we carry with us is not just a telephone anymore. It's a full-blown computer. And we have tens of thousands of programmers, of engineers that all day long try to make us engaged with their applications for making money. So if we remember this, I think I always I also think about mindfulness as a sort of shield that people can have at least something against a huge machine of people trying to steal their attention away all the time.
Okay, thank you very much. Time is running.
We have a question.
Yeah. Maciej?
Can I make a comment?
Please do.
Yeah.
Thank you very much. First, I would like to thank Mount Hengshu for mentioning this great Catholic church in Australia. Was it Australia? We also have this kind of church in Poland. But unfortunately, they are not teaching mindfulness or any meditation. They are teaching flat earth.
You're teaching what?
Flat earth.
Flat
Earth.
Flat Earth. Well, they're slow, but
But you also mentioned that mindfulness as this kind of movement can rid people of this hierarchy or importing Asian conflicts into Europe, be it Chinese or Tibetan or any other, Japanese for the matter. So they would be good, but only if mindfulness is connected with prajna. If prajna is being taught without being sworn to the lineage. What do you think is possible?
So, I'm. If the question is, if Magura's question is, if you're, take it right on face value, prajna is essentially experience of emptiness, and the emptying of emptiness that comes from prajna is number 6 of the paramitas, and you get there sequentially, having gone through 5 paramitas before that, and your mind is very, very quiet before you can experience emptiness, the way it's described in the Mahayana Sutras. Now, in the Theravada text, they talk about panya, but you get there differently. So is panya and prajna the same thing? It's a scholar's question. But I would say no. If you want to bargain prajna, you're going to get something other than the real deal. you want the real deal, you have to pay the price. And the price is whatever it takes to get your mind quiet, so that you can actually see through the skandhas. You can see through body and mind. So that you have to be very quiet to do that. And as soon as any one of your six senses is pulled out into the world around you, forget prajna. You know, so it's. I think there's no shortcuts, but people can, as we mentioned, if they get that first taste and they're willing to take the first step, that's a wholesome thing, and it's only a matter of time. If they use the method, they will get the result.
Okay, thank you very much.
I guess if there is one more question, yes.
Że cały czas jak przysłuchuję się tej rozmowie, to jakby mi tego słowa jakby współczucie albo serce jakoś mi się ciśnie, żeby wypowiedzieć, bo mi się wydaje, że raczej wszystkim buddyzm kojarzy się ze współczuciem i jeśli ja dobrze rozumiem termin mindfulness, to mi bardziej mi się kojarzy jako świadomość, koncentracja uwagi i że to jest jakby bardziej jakoś praca z tą częścią umysłu, ale też jak gdyby ten ostateczny cel jakby otwarcia serca i doświadczenia tego, że jakby nie jesteśmy odseparowani od siebie, że jakby to jest takie jądro buddyzmu i jeśli idzie w parze nauka mindfulness, uważności z nauką współczucia, empatii, serca, to wtedy może z za dużej gafy nie można jakby zrobić. No nie wiem, jak tutaj eksperci, panowie.
So, listening to what you're talking about, what comes to mind right away for me are these words compassion and heart, because I think when people think or talk about Buddhism, it makes them think right away about compassion. They associate Buddhism with compassion, whereas talking about mindfulness it makes me think more about awareness, about strengthening our powers of concentration and so on, which is not necessarily connected with opening the heart and empathy. So I think if we can connect mindfulness practices with developing compassion, opening the heart and being more empathic, then we can't go wrong so much with mindfulness if we connect it with this empathy and compassion.
Yeah. That's great, and I completely agree with Sandra. And that might be our intro into the second question, Tomas. Could you say it for us? And I want to connect Sandra's comments with that.
Seems to be that it's difficult to practice mindfulness, not mindfulness. We need to be aware of this. The next question, the three elements, the three aspects, dukkha, anatta, anicca, and influence into the environment. That's the topic.
Okay, so that could be an evening's lecture in itself, and it could also become deadly boring because there are a list of things, Sanskrit. So let's do it this way. If we say those are called the three, so dukkha, anatta, anicca, it's simply what the Buddha discovered about the nature of reality, and it's a description of phenomena, things in the world. The Buddha said, fundamentally, things that are created. The dukkha is, many people, that's all pretty much already an English word, I don't know about Polish, but often translated as suffering, it doesn't connect to people's experience. If you say unsatisfactory, or to translate that in the language of the street, doesn't hit the spot. Right? Things in the world don't hit the spot. I was trying to translate for Dharma Master Hong Jiang this afternoon at lunch, and I picked up my pen, and I'm writing along, and the pen ran out of ink. And so I said, please, I need another pen. Oh, here's the other pen. Took out the pen. That pen ran out of ink in the next sentence, you know. So it's like the world is always running out of ink when you need it, you know. It doesn't hit the spot. So that's dukkha. And the Buddha said, yeah, all things made of conditions are that way. They don't satisfy. And if you depend on them, you will be led to affliction because it'll let you down, including this thing, this gadget. Right? Number one. Number two, all things are impermanent, moving on. Things are momentary, right? Our attention span is momentary. And the computer program that you spent $350 on 18 months ago now needs an upgrade. And if you wait long enough, it won't even fit your operating system. Things move on. Right. True. This is the way I see the world, he said. And then the third one is that all things are not self. And you unpack that to say, fundamentally, it's the question of who am I? If we cling to an identity, oh, I'm now a Buddhist monk, how do you like my costume? You know, nice outfit, monk. You know. So that will let you down. It's not fundamentally true. It's conditions coming together. So these are the Buddha's description of reality. This characterizes all of reality. Things are unsatisfying. They move on. And you can't set up in things. Your identity, you will not find who you are in things. Okay, so what do we say about that for our question? It's the Buddha discovered these, they call the 3 seals of Dharma, the 3 imprints, the 3 fundamental truths about phenomena. If you can wake up to those, if one of them, you say, you know, that's true. I used to think I was going to live forever, now I realize I'm not. What about that? Does that change your perspective on the world around you? So, okay, so Sandra's question. I framed it. Lama Rinchen may reframe that, and Wojciech may reframe it, but that, just from my points of view, I would like to frame the question that way and say, once you wake up to what the Buddha woke up to, is the world the same or different? What's the impact of that wisdom on your relationship to the world? That's the question. Are you ever the same again once you experience how your body isn't going to last? Okay. So, let me apply that. Sandra's statement was, mindfulness goes to wisdom. What about compassion? And if you had to sum up what are called the 2 adornments of the Buddha, one is prajna, wisdom, one is karuna, compassion, so wisdom and compassion. When you see that this is empty, you realize everybody else is too. And yet some people wake up to it, others don't. If you still think this is permanent and with a facelift and with a hair change, your life is going to be better, you're heading for dukkha. You know, it's... So, I've been looking at one particular sutra for 40 years, the Avatamsaka, the Flower Garland Sutra. And there's a view of it in the Chinese Mahayana tradition that the Avatamsaka is the Buddha's highest philosophy. Right? It's lofty. It talks about the cosmos. It's full of philosophy and nobody can really understand it. Subtext, therefore don't bother trying to read it. That's a reason to not open it. Right? It's big, big text. All right. Master Shren Hua, the teacher whom I followed and who was the teacher of our monks and nuns in this tradition, spent 9 years every single night explaining that text. Without exception, 90 minutes every night. Opened it up, went to the next line. And when he was done, he said, anybody have any questions? If you don't have questions, I'm going to ask you questions. You better ask me questions first. Otherwise, you're going to have to answer my questions. Well, I don't understand. Oh, I'm glad you asked that. Let me say it again. So, clearly, this monk valued that text. He put it in front of us and said, pay attention to this. This is the Buddha's voice. And he didn't do what they do in China or in Korea or in Japan. I don't know as much about Tibet, but I think it's pretty much what I gather from His Holiness. He didn't go to the Shastras. The Chinese Asian tradition is you don't interpret the text yourself. You don't have enough wisdom. You go to the distinguished commentators of the Tang Dynasty or the Ming Dynasty, because they had the actual view. And read them and you'll get it. Master Hua said, we love the commentaries, we respect them deeply. Here's the voice of the Buddha. What do you think? Tell me what you think about his words. Read them yourself, translate them, digest them, meditate on them. What do you think about what you read? Right? And what we discovered was heart. Head, certainly, but heart. Right? The Bodhisattva path, where he said, you know, living beings are really pathetic. They turn away from wholesome teachers. They walk down narrow roads having left the broad highway. Right? They pursue dharmas that they know are going to give them a headache, and they eat that cookie anyway. Right? Living beings are really upside down. I have to think of a way to wake them up. If I don't do it, who's going to do it? Page after page after page of the Bodhisattva's vows to get involved in what? Honestly speaking, relationship. The Avatamsaka Sutra is steeped in human relationships. Often it's teacher-student, but the Bodhisattva appears in countless transformation bodies to get near to somebody, to get their trust. So when the time comes, he can say, you know, if you stop smoking, chances are you'd have a little more pocket money. If you stopped eating so many hamburgers, chances are your intestines would be healthier and they'd have less chance of getting colon cancer. Etc., etc. You know, they appear next to people, getting their trust so that they can talk heart to heart and be heard and accepted. It's about relationships. It's how to speak Dharma in a way that helps other people wake up so that your awakening can be complete. So that's what I hear. And it's, you know, this, so rephrase the question. Once you meet the Buddha's wisdom, are you ever the same? What's it like once you discover the nature of reality that your pen's going to run out of ink? Don't count on it. How does that change you for the world around you, with your family, with your pets, with your employer, with your enemies, right? I'm reframing the question that way, and I agree with Sandra that if we only go for the emptiness and miss the heart connection, there's more to learn. So anyway, that's my take.
It goes on. Well, first of all, I would like to say some personal things that I'm so positively not surprised, but just kind of, not make sure again that whenever you explain, like even the term of mindfulness or this or that, is exactly the way how my teacher would teach. So it's same Dharma. So we come from different traditions, but really the same kind of approach and the same view. And I think that what I was saying before, I didn't call it by name, but I was trying to somehow call the word of compassion by saying, for example, that those with the highest capacity for practice, to whom Buddha teach, was those who didn't care only for their own suffering, but they cannot stand, they cannot bear the suffering of others. And also when I was asking if just practicing mindfulness will bring people more care for others, I just used that word for compassion. But in fact, in so many, like Venerable mentioned, so many texts which are saying that this union of understanding or realizing emptiness and compassion, this is the real meaning of the middle way. And even like in the what is called in Sanskrit Ashtasahasrika Prajnaparamita Sutra, the Prajnaparamita Sutra in the 8,000 verses, it even says that Mara appears in two ways, as a skillful means, which refers to all the 5 paramitas like generosity, ethics, and so on, which includes generally, it is included under the compassion, care for others. So just the skillful means without prajna, or the other way, Mara appears as a prajna without skillful means. So the middle way is to combine those. But instead of saying about some text, I will say something from my teacher, Venerable Tengar Rinpoche, who he already passed away a few years ago. He used to always stress that the real experience of emptiness cannot appear without having the genuine compassion. And if there is a real experience of compassion, the real experience of emptiness, then compassion is naturally born. Like you said, if I say I am empty, just call it I am empty. in this very short way. Then I see others have also the same nature, but unnecessarily they believe that if I crave for this and that phenomena and try to surround myself with this phenomena and get rid of the others, it will make me happy. You see the foolishness of this approach. So there is naturally born compassion. And I will refer to one situation. I remember some years ago, that was 99, I remember this very well. And then when Rinpoche was giving some teachings in Kathmandu, an Australian woman came and she said that she was practicing Vipassana in the Theravada tradition. And she thinks she had some experience or realization of emptiness. And usually, many times I translated for Rinpoche, whenever people start to talk about the experiences, good, next one please. Because usually they are just, kind of made by intellect or this kind of by expectations, experiences. So Rinpoche again was like this. She said, because when I had this experience, I felt such an unbearable compassion that I just came to you to request you for the Bodhisattva vow. Rinpoche's ears became kind of red, and he just said, yeah, that's the real experience of emptiness. I will give you this Bodhisattva vow. And later again in the teachings he said, whenever you think you have experience of emptiness, but there is no this unbearable compassion, it means this is just emptiness made by intellect, intellectually made emptiness. So it's very much, yes, mindfulness, genuine mindfulness, it goes along with compassion. Without that, it's kind of game of mind.
Or premature.
Yeah, or premature.
Okay, I was very interested to hear how your teacher related directly to Buddha's words, to suttas. This is what we encourage people to do all the time. We live in a world that has never been before as easy to access Buddha's teachings directly, whether these are Mahayana sutras or Pali sutras, which of course we encourage people to read Pali sutras. They also have this advantage that they are shorter, and so it's easier to make people read them. But when you read them and you not only read about the teachings, but how Buddha behaved and how much compassion did he show to people. This is not conveyed in a philosophical book. This is real life situations, and also real life examples he gave. Because the topic was supposed to also be about environment, and what came to my mind is a comparison of people to fishes competing in a smaller and smaller puddle. So I think this is 2,500 years ago. The puddle was still big, the fishes were few, and now we are even in a worse situation. So we definitely need to look at our greed, our lack of satisfaction, and maybe use Buddha's teachings to do something about this.
I have a story I'd like to share, if it's all right. Yeah. In the formation of a monk in my tradition, our teacher explained Confucius by day and Mahayana sutras at night. And his reason for that was, he said, we're learning from the Buddha, but we start from understanding what it means to be a human being. He says the Buddha is an accomplished human. You Americans, he said, you have wonderful machines, you don't know how to be people yet. He said, here's what we're going to do. And so he taught us about virtues of the nature, he called it. And traditionally, not just in the Chinese rendering, but also in India, therefore in Nepal and Tibet, there's a strong emphasis placed on that primary relationship between child and parent. And they say trees stand on their roots. Humans stand on the roots that are their parents. So in order to open the door to the fullness of virtue that is the Buddha, there's another name of the Buddha, which is someone whose 10,000 virtues are perfected. They say in Chinese, 10,000 is a real number in Chinese. That is, the myriad virtues are developed. You could say the covers are pulled off the virtues that are already there, and that nature is shining. But from childhood, in order to get there, the first lesson when you're educating a child is to say, do you realize that in order to become a human being, you were given a gift? Your body, from your parents. And the joy of discovering that you're alive because of somebody's generosity in a good-hearted child will give him the sense of, I would like to repay that. So this is called filiality, filial respect. Not filial piety. Mind you, piety, we go big red X over piety. Piety is not the word. It was an early scholar's translation for this concept. So filial respect is a sense of acknowledging the roots, finding the roots that you stand on as a human. And you go from individual connection to your parents. At a certain age, children look sideways and discover, oh, I've got siblings. I'm not the center of the universe. I actually have an older brother, I have a younger sister, and I have, there's a neighborhood, and I'm connected to the neighborhood. We share certain things, and so as the child develops, they expand. And if that education continues, at a certain point, the child says, oh, I'm actually connected to all living beings. Compassion is a reality. We share the same earth, air, fire, and water in our bodies. And fundamentally, we share a common nature. It's not different. You know, we meet in empty space. There's no fence between my nature and your nature, no matter what you call it. So you go from filial connection to great compassion if the education continues. And a wise teacher is pointing out what's already inherent inside and then opens it up. So I live in Berkeley, at the Berkeley Buddhist Monastery, and we've been there for 21 years. And every Thursday night, from 21 years ago until tonight, it's today Thursday, in California, Spirit Rock, East Bay, comes to the monastery. Spirit Rock is Jack Kornfield's insight meditation, Vipassana group. And they have an East Bay group, which is Berkeley and Oakland, and they meet at our monastery. They've been there every Thursday night. And occasionally the teacher, James, will go away, and he'll recruit me to do the teaching sometimes. So one night I got the chance, and I said, okay, looking out at the 90 Berkeley people, most of whom are psychotherapists, most of whom are Jewish, interestingly enough. Jubus, right? Jewish Buddhists. So the Jubus are out there, and I said, okay, now, my turn tonight. Hi, everybody. And they go, you know, don't talk about vegetarian, we don't want to hear it. You know? So I say, okay, I have an experiment for you tonight. I would like you all to go back, and James asked me to teach two weeks. He's on retreat. So you go back and you find a significant elder to relate to. Not a significant butler, a significant elder. Find somebody. Grandparent is fine. Lonely neighbor, you know, kids grown up or spouse died, a widow, a widower. Find somebody in your life close by and go ask them a question. You can say to them, hi, you have a minute? And they probably will. You say, I'm a mindfulness person now. I'm a meditator. And I've realized that I'm getting older. I've realized impermanence, right? I've realized that I'm really getting older, and you're further down the road than I am. You have more experience, you have more wisdom. Could you share with me what you've learned along the road? And I said, so go find a significant elder in your life and ask that question. I guarantee that old person will say, oh, I'm so glad you asked me. Please come in. Would you like a cookie? Have some tea. You know. Nobody thinks to ask elders about their experience. All right, so I say, go do that and then come back and we'll talk about it. All right? Second week comes along. I'm back. And okay, so let me know. How did our experiment go? Who would like to share some of the stories that you heard? Not a hand. No hand. I said, okay, well, what happened? Well, Dharma Master, we don't have elders in our lives. I moved away when I was 17 and I haven't looked back. And I don't have it. I said, well, surely somebody did. Okay, there's one woman, her name is Sumaya. She says, actually, I did. She said, something about the timing of your giving us that assignment was just right, because why? I've been meditating with James's group Vipassana for about 8 years now. You all know me. You know, yeah, we know you. She said, and I've realized recently that when I meditate, there's kind of a block. Something here, kind of like, isn't connecting here. Maybe like ice or something. And, you know, 10 years ago, before I started to meditate, when I was 20 years old, I left my mother. My mother used to nag me. She had a song that she would sing. And her song was, you know what's wrong with you? I'll tell you what's wrong with you. Everything's wrong with you, from your shoes all the way to your hairstyle, and I'm going to tell you. And she said, I just got so fed up with that I left. American thing, you just go, you know. And I haven't talked to her for 10 years. And everybody's going, she says, but the more I meditate, the more I realize that I'm actually connected in deep, deep, deep ways through my parents to all beings. And it's time. Good, you gave us that. It's time. I said, go talk to my mom. So she said, I did what you said, and I pulled the drawer out, and I had to dig for her phone number. But I found the number, and I gave her a call, and first thing she did, she said, Maya, you know what's wrong with you? I'll tell you what's wrong with you. You never call me. That's what's wrong with you. She said, Mom, you're so cute. You never call me. She said, I'm going to come see you. Silence. Okay. Hung the phone up. And she said, well, I walked the 10 blocks to my mother's house. No need for a car. She just lives around the corner. 10 years. And I knocked on the door, and she opened it, and she was smaller than I remember. My mother seemed to have shrunk, And she said, you know what's wrong with you, Tobias? You never come and see me. That's what's wrong with you. And I said, I gave my mother a hug, and we sat down with tea, and we talked all night. And I've decided I'm going to move back home with her. All the women in the room go, So I said, well, that's really interesting. What else? So Maya says, yeah. She said, that's the funny part. She says, the next day, after I hugged my mom and talked to her all night, she said, when I meditated, my whole body was warm. Something here melted. It's just instantly. And I had a block of ice in my heart, where my mother should have been. So she said, I want to thank you for that instruction, because it made a world of difference in my life. And I can't stand her, but I love her. So I thought, that's a great story. Now, what do all the rest of you think about that? And they're all going, yeah, we didn't know Sumaya had a mother. We thought she just kind of popped out, She was an independent American California woman. And then John, one more. So then John Porter. John Porter lives in Oakland, and he's a plumbing inspector. He goes to the new construction projects and inspects and gives the green tag if it passes, Tough guy, big beard, never talks. John is like, that kind of guy. He never talks, But he's a dedicated Vipassana sitter. So everybody goes, John? Yes? He says, yeah, I have a story. He said it was just like she said, it was just right. She said, my father was one of those people who believes in a doomsday cult. The world is going to end at this time and this place. He really believed it, hook, line, and sinker. He totally believed it. And so he said the group gathered on the beach outside of San Francisco and waited for the sun to rise in the west, right? Well, didn't happen. The sun rose in the east, and his faith was shattered. He was just one of those people, and he totally just gave up on the world, and he moved down to Bakersfield, to the edge of the desert, and lost touch with us. And so I knew he was there. I always felt a connection. So you gave me that assignment. And so I got in my car, and I drive the 900 miles to Bakersfield, California, and found my dad's house. And I knocked on the door, and I heard a voice from far inside, John, is that you? Went inside, I hadn't called him. I said, yeah, Dad. He said, I had a feeling it might be you. And my dad was sitting in a dark room facing the window outside. And my dad said to me, he said, are you meditating? Is that what you do? Could you teach me how to meditate? He said, I had the best weekend meditating with my father. And he's decided that he might come up and visit me. So thank you for that, he said. It's just good timing. I think I've reconnected with my dad. So everybody in the room was like, maybe we'll try it again. Maybe we'll go out and see if we can't find a significant elder to listen to. Right? And if you do it, I'll give the assignment to anybody here who wants it. I won't, there we go. I won't be here to hear the story, but once is easy, go back a second time and say, hey, some of those stories you told me are really good. I want to hear more. You bring the cookies this time. So it's amazing how the Buddha Dharma was not given to executives in their carols or you in your car. It was given in a social context where there are grandparents, there are children, there are aunts, there are uncles, there are pets, there are invisible beings, ancestors, gods and dragons, and the eightfold pantheon of spiritual Dharma protectors. That's the world in the sutras. It's alive with relationships. And we isolate ourselves to a single screen, or if you have an iPad, 2 screens. If you have a laptop, 3 screens. If you have a Game Boy, 4 screens, and the rest of the world goes to hell. You don't care, because you're settled. You got your friends, right? We have isolated ourselves to our detriment. It is not a benefit to try to find virtual replacement to what we used to get from our human connection. So anyway, that's my story.
Thank you very much. Okay, I guess we all need to contemplate how to change dukkha. We sometimes translate as a bad fit also. Bad fit.
Bad fit.
Yeah, means we resonate wrongly in a wrong way with reality, and this kind of bad fit, dukkha, can be changed into sukha, means something which is the opposite to the dukkha, or even mahasukha. And this issue we need to contemplate first how we can transform in our life, and later on try to influence surroundings, society and world. Okay, I guess the time for the third topic. Time is running, and the third topic is the role of Buddha Dharma as a model of sustainable development in 21st centuries, means non-self. How this kind of practices and how the Buddha Dharma can really influence the present time. Master, may you please?
I can frame it. Does anything come to mind right away to jump in, or shall I frame it? Okay. So, what's it? Good. Okay, here's an idea. How is your meditation relevant to the world? That's the question. How is what you do as a Buddhist relevant? You're following an ancient Indian religion, right? Which now has a whole new Western face. Are you looking backwards? Or are you actually getting something from what you practice that makes you a valuable member of European society in 2017? I would say, yes, you are. Yes, we are. For example, the marketplace tells us there is infinite abundance. You never run out of Coca-Cola, right? You just go buy some more. When does Coca-Cola run out? Infinite. We have oceans of Coca-Cola, right? Infinite, right? When does gasoline? How many of you drive with the thought of conserving gasoline? Honestly, I better drive less because gas is a precious commodity and extracted from the blood of the earth. Don't, right? It's like, boom, oh, I'm late. We don't have a thought that the earth is finite and we're consuming it. It is unsustainable. And I'm speaking as an American who are the #1 worst abusers of consumption. Right? Americans consume 5-10 times more than any other developed nation. Never mind third world. Right? We live as if this was our right, to have all of this, the gold and the rare earths that go into this, so you can check your email, right? Okay, you get the point. So, as a Buddhist, what I'm hoping we can contribute is your answer to the question, how much do I need? How much stuff is just enough? If everybody in this room could, tomorrow in the marketplace, as you go online to buy your stuff online, could ask ourselves, what is the line between need and, oh, here it becomes greed? Right? It would be a different world. And your kids would watch you and they would change, and your spouse would watch you and he or she would change. It would register, right? Oh, you're using it again. Huh. My mother, bless her heart, grew up in the Great Depression in America. She was the sixth child, the youngest daughter of 4 girls. She said she never had her own dress until she graduated high school. Every single piece of clothing that she had was a hand-me-down. Do you know what a hand-me-down is? Handed down from her sisters. They had a mantra. Use it up, wear it out, make it do, or do without. Right? You use it up because why? That's all there is. You wear it out. You use it until it's gone. You make it do. You turn it over, rehem it, turn it inside out, or do without because why? There isn't a second. This is your dress. Right? That was the mantra back then. So my question is, if people say, what are you sitting there for? Just like a bump. You think you're just practicing to be dead, right? You're not dead yet, but you're just sitting there like a dead person. That's Buddhism for you? People criticize. They're really cynical. You're sitting there, do so. Don't just sit there. Do something. So you say, well, sitting here, I am not consuming. I'm consuming oxygen. I'm transforming for the trees. I'm exhaling for the trees. I'm putting carbon dioxide out for the benefit of those leaves. I like the forest outside Polynesia. I want to give it more carbon dioxide. Valuable. So you can, as Buddhas, if people say, are you relevant? You say, actually, it's what I'm not consuming that makes my religious, my spiritual path valuable. So, question. How much is enough? For the last thing I want to say is for the Sangha, here, the robed monastics particularly, the Buddha said, yeah. These are mendicants, they live on alms, and what do they need? They need clothes for, warm clothes for the cold, light clothes for the heat, they need food and drink, just enough, they need medicine when they're sick, and they need shelter. Then their spirit can soar. So that's framing the question, is what contribution can Buddhists make to sustainability and the situation we find ourselves on this planet in 2017?
Agree, but just to, kind of expand. Is it working? Okay. Of course, totally I agree, but to make it, a little bit more elaborated, again, that only have less needs is very noble, but it's not sufficient, right? Because there are many people in this world who just, I don't need anything more, but it makes me temporarily happy. Myself, I don't meet many of these kind of people in Europe, but I've seen many among Tibetan refugees, elder people, not the young people, and like in Nepal, people who just say, yes, I'm so happy because I have everything what I need. But it's of course temporary happiness. It will be not this long-term happiness. But if if this will be again reinforced with the wisdom, understanding, interconnectedness and emptiness, and with the compassion, then it is this kind of being happy, how it is called in English, to be satisfied with what you have, chokli in Tibetan, contentment, right? Contentment. This is the basis. We don't doubt. Always craving for having more and more and more. We are just pretending to practice the real Dharma. This is the basis, and this is what is most important. We don't doubt we cannot really follow the spiritual path. But just to say, this one story for kind of inspiration. There is a story of Sakya Pandita who lived in, I think it was 12th century, around. He was invited by the Emperor of China from Tibet, the Tibetan Lama, and the Emperor, which I don't remember who was that Emperor, he was asking, so you come from Tibet, so what you have in Tibet, what kind of great hero you have, and what kind of rich people you have in Tibet. And Sakya Pandita was very smart, and he said, our greatest hero is Milarepa, and our richest person is Karan Gomjung. Then how many armies he conquered in the battle, how many people he killed in the battle, this Milarepa, to be greatest hero. And Sakya Pandita said, no, we consider killing people who anyway will die. It's like killing corpses. It's not any honor and anything special in that. But he has conquered all his inner emotional defilements, all his weak points. That's why this is the greatest hero. And then the second part is important for our topic. Then how much gold does have, and any jewels and so on, does have this richest person in Tibet, the Karan Gomjung? Oh, actually he is living in heritage, just meditating in his cave, and he is having only his bowl, begging bowl and the stick, but he does not have any needs. So in this way, he has more than he needs. So in that way, he's richer, more rich even from the Emperor of China. So
you can get your head cut off saying things like that.
Yeah, okay. But what I mean, yes, that the mind which is always wanting something is never happy. Okay, there is maybe short satisfaction when you just get it, and before you are bored with what you got, before the program or the gadget became already too old, 1 year old. But generally, yes, very much agree that this contentment is a basis of actually any other good qualities, human qualities.
Okay, I would definitely agree that contentment is important and is good. I would even go further and say that it's necessary for our survival as people, because we are not able to all live like Americans or even Europeans, because either we're going to kill ourselves or we're going to say, okay, I can do with less. But to round it up with the topic of meditation and mindfulness, I think this here, if you're practicing, whether this is mindfulness of breathing, or it's metta, loving kindness, or any other meditation technique you're using, and you're able to really have satisfaction, or have this point where you can always go back on your meditation topic, and then when you enter the marketplace, when you're all tempted with all this Coca-Cola, with all these gadgets, you always have this point, like you can go back, whether this is breathing or metta or whatever you're using, to use this meditation technique or topic to say, okay, I'm content, I'm happy with what I have, I don't need any more.
Okay, this subject of sustainable development is something which is my profession in some fields. In this case, I would like to say a few more words. The elements you all emphasize, I guess, is one side, but this is not everything what we can benefit from the Buddha Dharma, because even if we will limit our needs, still most of the beings will overuse the planet, and it's the question how to secure society doing some kind of activity to minimize the negative impact of the society, especially environmental protection. I'm dealing with the coal ash utilization. Globally, we burn 7 billion tons of coal a year, resulting with 1 billion tons of ashes. And what to do? Even if we will use little bit electricity, the production will go, and what to do? The issue, what we can have from the Buddha Dharma, is the way how we recognize reality, how we recognize the quality of things. Interdependence mostly recognize the value in this kind of ashes, in this kind of waste, and to transform the waste into the product. In a sense of reuse these minerals for cement production, concrete production, road construction, as a filler and so on. In meantime, minimizing the stockpiling and minimizing the using of the virgin materials, virgin aggregates. And this kind of teaching from the Buddha, that we need to go deeply into reality. We need to determine everything what we perceive in much deeper way when normally, typically people relate to reality. That's the way. And through interdependence, interconnectiveness, through changing the way of perception of reality, not accepting some kind of stigmas into some minerals like the ashes, they are always bad. This is not true. There is no inherent relation between the names and things. That's exactly the Buddha Dharma teaching. In this case, everything has their own qualities and their own place, the positive place in reality. Is the question of stupidity of us, the people, is the question of lack of scrutiny, lack of intention, lack of focus to recognize where is the proper place for this kind of minerals. And from the Buddha Dharma, I benefit mostly going deeper and deeper till the end, and never accepting the failure that they have to be the waste, useless minerals. No way. And the job I'm doing, and many thousands of my friends on this globe, is how to transform way of thinking and the waste into the resource, to close the loop and actively support society in this way. And I guess from the Buddha Dharma, we really need to apply this kind of deep analysis of the reality. That's why we are studying Nitartha, we are studying in Shedra, trying to understand the relation between things, and through this recognition we can transform everything. And there is not a problem in ashes, it's only the problem with perception, and people trust in the qualities. And this is this kind of active part of the Buddha Dharma. We can really bring a lot of positive impact into the society. In the end, my nickname is Tom Ash. In this case, please, it's easy to remember between the friends. Just ash is absolutely valuable mineral, and we can turn everything into positive. when we trust, when we recognize the quality and know the place, how to put this kind of minerals, to turn the problem into chances. Thank you.
Actually, I have an idea for you.
Yeah.
You know.
Ash into cash.
Talking about India, you know, in India, the ascetics, they cover their bodies with ash, and actually you could use ash from human bodies to sell for the people who want to really, you know, like practice yoga seriously, to cover their bodies with human ash. There will be another kind of recycling.
Exactly. This year I was in Calcutta with presentation this kind of approach, and also in Beijing. Hopefully, worldwide cooperation will start to turn the gray into green.
Who has questions about any of the other topics? Like, we ask for questions after question 1. Jaski.
Było mowy w ogóle o przyczynie i skutku, czyli wiecznym prawie natury, o którym Budda nas nauczał, że jest dobro i zło tylko. Jeżeli się rozumie, że to, co sieję, będę zbierał, to już bardzo wielki krok jest do przodu dla tego, który chce swoje życie zmienić na nowe, czyli pełne, głębokie oświecenie, przekroczenie narodzin i śmierci. Dla mnie to bardzo wiele mówi i bardzo mi pomaga w mojej praktyce. Także czekałem, kiedy to stwierdzenie padnie, ale jakoś nie usłyszałem, że w prawie natury istnieją dwie strony medalu, dobra i zła. Dziękuję.
A jakie było pytanie?
So I didn't hear anything here about the law of cause and effect and about good and bad. That the reality is simple. Buddha talked about what is good and bad, and that what we sow, then that we reap, and that our actions have consequences. And if we understand that, this cause and effect, and good actions and bad actions, and good results, bad results, the connection, then we can really walk the Buddhist path and reach, get out of the wheel of life and death, and reach full enlightenment. So I missed that part here.
Okay. The young gentleman in front also had a question.
Good night. We just met like 3 friends from India. They didn't know anything about Buddhism, and Chita just invited them to come here tonight. And I have just one question: what is Buddhism?
You want to translate for yourself into French?
It's okay.
I'm kidding. That's okay. So if I were to dive in, I would say it is education. Education.
If I should answer, that actually in the language in which Buddha was teaching, there is not existing such a word as a Buddhism. It's just a term created by Westerners. We rather speak about Dharma, which is what Buddha teaches. And of course, if you look to the literal meaning, Dharma has 4 different meanings, but generally it means the truth, how things really are. So Buddhism is to understand how really is, what is the real nature of ourselves, of the world we live in, the relation, so to understand how things really are. This is Buddhism about.
Well, I can add as
a small story from the sutta where Buddha took some few leaves from the ground and asked his students how there are many leaves I have. They said, no, Bhante, most of the leaves are on the trees, there are just few you have in your hands. And then he said, well, this is the same with the teachings I give. I give only few teachings to you, and I know much more than that. And I give those teachings because they are conducive to end of suffering, and the rest is not. So the main topic is of Buddha teaching is always how to end the suffering.
What I like in the Chinese tradition is that they don't they introduce another word, which is a rich source of insight, and they use the word Tao, the Tao. And so it's kind of synonymous. You can say, oh, when you reach the goal of Buddhist practice, some people say Changfo, you become a Buddha. In other words, you have great wisdom. Some people say you realize the Tao. That's another word. And so a quick and dirty translation of the Tao is the way things are before words and thoughts. So is there a state of reality that exists before you think of it or try to name it? And the Buddhists would say, yes, it is. And you can know that, but you have to realize it through work. So the Buddha woke up and then talked about waking us up so that we would all realize Tao. I like this notion.
In India, you have Bodh Gaya, in this case, short way to go, just to see how things works in more details. And we are happy to have Lumbini in Poland. Lumbini is the small restaurant nearby. You can have good food. And
wait. Was that where the Buddha was born?
no, that's exactly. But this is like great nutrition place, very good food. Okay. There is any more question?
There is. Yay.
This is a question for all three of you all. Throughout history, we've seen that suffering, great suffering, has been a gateway to Dhamma. It's mostly people who have suffered and are in pain who usually go to get a cure for their suffering. So I'm wondering, in the modern world, as we live today, what is the relevance of Dhamma in a more preventive space? Is there a gateway to Dhamma without suffering, and is there a gateway to go through it before you actually suffer? So how do we bring that into the modern world?
Well, actually, if you look to the life of the Shakyamuni Gautama, he didn't go himself through much of suffering. He was rather living a luxury life. But he has seen that others are suffering, and it moved him, and it was his basic motivation, how to help others to get rid of suffering. And then he realized, then you have to get rid of the causes of suffering, of course. And maybe I think in modern Buddhism in India, many of the poorest people were converted, if we can use that word, converted to Buddhism, but it is not necessarily in the, like for example in our Western countries. It's not the people who mostly suffer, they search for some kind of liberation from suffering in Buddhism. Usually, like, if I look at least to our group, especially for the last 10 or 15 years, most of the people who would come and who are really interested with Buddhism, very often, these are people who are fulfilled in the way that they have a good family, they have good education, they have good job, satisfactory life situation, and still they feel it is not really satisfying. It is not really sufficient. It's the people who have the capacity to understand that pleasure and happiness is not necessarily the same. So I don't think that you have to go really through pain in order to be inspired to practice Dharma, but you see that the ordinary, this kind of life of consuming, taking some objects, rejecting others, this is not satisfactory. And for this you need some kind of special mental attitude. Actually, in Buddhism we believe that to have that attitude you need a lot of punya. You know, punya, this kind of merit, or some people translate it as like karmic benefits. This is a result of many good actions from the past lives.
So, that's a really good question. And two thoughts came to mind. One is Ajahn Sumedho. Do people know Ajahn Sumedho? He's the Venerable Ajahn Chah's Western disciple who came from Thailand to England to set up the Forest Sangha. And by his teaching, he's now retiring, he's in the process of retiring. Under his teaching, 200 some Westerners have left the home life and become monastics. Something he is saying is connecting with people who have said, yes, I'm going to go forth from the home into the homeless life and cultivate the way. And Ajahn Sumedho was at the City of 10,000 Buddhas, our main monastery, last month. He is one of the few people who is invited to sit in Master Hua's chair, by the way. And so what did he do? He spoke the Dharma that he has spoken for 40 plus years, which is the Four Noble Truths. He is an expert at converting the teaching on dukkha into people's experience. And he has touched this pulse, particularly in Great Britain, but also all over Europe and the world, of saying, dukkha is anxiety, is frustration, is uncertainty about the future. And he strings out his nouns about mental states. As the Venerable said, you know, it's the state of mind, whether or not you're content, you know. And Sumedho has been able to say it in a way that Westerners just go, I totally get what the Buddha was talking about. So there's one. So these are, you know, first world individuals who, in the midst of having every sense crammed with a variety of sensations, say, doesn't hit the spot. That really doesn't hit the spot. You know, I'm looking for something beyond sensory experience. Okay, that's one. But there's another phenomenon going on here at the very same time, another part of the globe, which is when you go to Buddhist Asia, particularly China, Vietnam, Japan, Korea, not as much in the Tibetan tradition, but also there. The Dharma that people reach for is Pure Land. They're acting for out of bhakti. They're looking for devotion. And the number one method in China, certainly, and this includes Taiwan, Singapore, Malaysia, and Hong Kong, and wherever the Chinese diaspora went, they recite the Buddha's name. That's what they want. They want Namo Amitabha, Namo Amitofo. And why? Why is that the case? Because you look back in the Tang Dynasty, from the 6th to the 10th century, Amitabha wasn't there. It was Maitreya. Maitreya was the cult, quote, that they reached for. Amitabha hadn't was arriving then as the main figure. And since the last 1400 years, Amitabha has just become the doorway to liberation, and Maitreya has pretty much vanished in the Chinese mind. So what is it? And looking at America, Americans, I can't speak for Poland, but by and large Americans are not interested in Amitabha at all. He looks too much like the Lutheran God, you know, up there, and they've left the idea of the powers up there in the heaven. So Americans don't want that, and yet Chinese reach for it. Why? If you think about it, life in China was a series of painful experiences. First came the floods. The Yellow River overflooded its banks, washed the crops away. Then came the drought, and nothing grew and people starved. Following that, the emperor sent his recruiters out because he wanted to go to war, and he got your son to, you know, and your horse to go off to war. Then came the locusts, and they ate up everything in sight, everything green. Following that came the tax collector, and the tax collector stripped you of things you weren't nailed down. So the Chinese, just to get through the year, experienced physical distress, emotional distress, pain and misery. They heard about this land called Sukhavati in the West, where 3 kinds of rebirth are not there. There's no evil destinies, no ghosts, no hells, no animals, no McDonald's, because there are no cows to make hamburgers, you know. Suffering is gone from the land of utmost happiness. And what do? They grab for their beads and they went, Namo Mitoba, Namo Mitoba, Namo Mitoba. In the West, with the slightest discomfort, we reach for Ambien, we reach for Tylenol, we reach for or drugs, or the needle, or TV, or the credit card, retail therapy, right? Anything to keep us in this false heaven where dukkha doesn't interfere. We buy our way out of dukkha, and that's a temporary fix. So it may be America, speaking as an American, has to go through a lot of Donald Trumps before we actually start to recite his name and say, this world sucks, I'm heading for the Pure. So the Chinese were pushed by misery. The British are entranced by Sumedho's description of their existential reality. So different part of the globe, different motives.
I can only add that.
We have translated Ajahn Sumedho's book on Four Noble Truths, exactly. So if you want a copy in Polish, they are downstairs with other our books. They are free to take. So in case you're interested to learn something more about suffering in Polish, please go ahead.
Okay, I am very bad moderator. We are nearly 1 hour out of time, but discussion was so nice. I hope you accept my apologies. There are many or some urgent questions which should be asked right now. If not, I would like to say thank you very, very much for our speakers, especially for the Venerable Dr. Heng Shur, for Venerable Lama Rinchen, and for Wojciech Czypicki. I would like to say thank you very much for all of you, for your patience, for questions happened, and for visiting Karma Deshin Cheling. I hope this discussion about the Buddhism in a present time will enrich you with some ideas how to contemplate the reality, how to contemplate the practice, and how to change world into better way of living. Thank you very much.
Thomas, would you say a word about our faithful translator, Jacek?
Yes, Jacek, thank you very much for your fantastic works. Really, last time and today, you know, I listen to you, it's absolutely marvelous, perfect translation. Thank you very much.
Yeah.
Dziękujemy bardzo również Jackowi za tłumaczenie na język polski. Fantastyczne tłumaczenie, absolutnie bezbłędne, nadążające za słowami mówców. Bardzo, bardzo dziękujemy Jacku. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Tom.
Dedication.
Okay. How do you transfer merit in Tibet? Do you have a chant that you use? Or?
Oh, well, we use Tibetan chant for that.
Tibetan?
Yes, which is a quotation from some sutra, and to translate it like ad hoc roughly, it is like, may by all the merit which we accumulated, may we quickly achieve the Buddhahood and conquer all the enemies, means the inner enemies, ignorance, hatred, and so on. And may, after that, or by that, may we liberate every single sentient being from the ocean of suffering, this ocean full of the waves of birth, sickness, old age, and death. Shall I recite it in Tibetan?
Yeah, let's listen.
Wy tam cię zikpani, tobne nie pedranam tam cię, ciegana ci bala trupaj, sype cole droła czolwa siu.
There's I can't do it. There's a verse that the Abhagiri monks do, and I only have a piece of it, but there's in English. It's a very nice, translated by Maurice Walsh. May the goodness that arises from my practice and through this act of sharing, etc. So, could I offer an English language transference? Okay. Behind you is that. Yeah, do you mind, Joshua? Thank you. Careful with you. We put the transference into music for Westerners, and the idea is that we have spent this last several hours tune this, or it could be more dukkha if we don't get it tuned here. So the idea is that by spending the last several hours together with wholesome friends, there is punya there. Again, think of the things we could have been doing that we weren't doing, all of the evil that we avoided by sitting here, listening to principles and sharing among the various members of the Buddhist family. And so that goodness can be shared. We use that space in the air, in our hearts, where minds touch, and send out the goodness. The way a lighthouse sends out a light, the way a cell phone tower sends out a signal. And with that intention, which is yours, and you make your intention. We say, I dedicate all this goodness to, and then you fill in the blank. Who are you sharing your merit with the wish that? Who are you? What are you hoping to accomplish? In Judaism they say tikkun olam, you heal the world. In Roman Catholicism they talk about petitionary prayer, where altogether with God's grace you benefit people. And we can make that transference whatever we want it to be. May all beings quickly accomplish Buddhahood together. May all beings lead a Christ-like life, whatever that would be. So make it your wish, okay? We use a melody just to give it some wings. And this is, if people are interested, we listened last night to the Warsaw Village Band. You know, the folk roots musicians, they've been around for 20 years. and also to a man whose name was Adam Struk. Wonderful musicians who are going to the roots of Polish culture and bringing forward into the 21st century the oldest traditions they find, including some of the oldest musicians who keep the tradition alive. Very wonderful experience. And all three of the bands, the other was Warsaw Sentimental Orchestra, they all showed the influence of a singer-composer whose name was Lorena McKennitt. I don't know if anybody is a Lorena McKennitt fan, but she's a Canadian singer-songwriter, pretty much retired now. But for the last 20 plus years, she has been traveling the world finding Celtic music everywhere, including Poland, including Turkey, including Galicia, Spain, and with those rhythms and with those fiddles and melodies. And I heard Lorena McKennitt's influence last night so strongly on everyone. She is the composer of the melody for this song, and she gave me permission to borrow this melody for our dedication to merit. The verse comes from the Mahayana tradition, but the melody is Lorena McKennitt. Here we go. Those of you who know, please do.
Our minds as one and radiant with love, share the fruits of peace, with hearts of goodness through mist and rise. If people hear and see how hands and hearts can find in giving unity, may our minds awake to great compassion, wisdom, and to joy. May kindness find reward, may all who sorrow leave their grief and pain. May this boundless light break the darkness of their endless night. Because our hearts are one, this world of pain turns into paradise. May all become compassionate and wise. May all become compassionate and wise.
So may it be so. Do you know, Asher, do we? This is a chance for maybe our last chance for the whole delegation to hear. Do we have any announcements?
Right.
Is it Thomas? Okay.
Yeah, sure, perfect,
yeah.
absolutely.
So I want to announce that tomorrow will be our last evening in Warsaw. So we want to invite for the last evening and actually be hosted here. And it's called Awaken Circle with special guests, Nipun Mehta, who is the founder of service-based organization. And maybe just a few words, can you share to us what is Awaken Circle about?
This is, the speaker is Audrey Lynn, who's put on the spot from Oakland, California, but she's ready for that.
Sure. An Awaken Circle started, I think, 18, almost 19 years ago in Silicon Valley. Just a group of friends, 3 friends, wanted to grow in stillness. And so they decided on a Wednesday night to sit in their living room for an hour in silence, in meditation. And over time, they decided to leave the door unlocked and invited friends to come along and And so it's grown into the same thing, just an hour of stillness, an hour of meditation, followed by a passage from a different wisdom tradition that is read, and then it's just a circle of sharing. So a place of reflection for people to reflect on teachings from different wisdom traditions and reflect on how that relates to them in their own lives. And then at the end, usually the host offers, a meal or snacks in service, and it's just a expression of stillness and service and community. I think tomorrow's circle might be a little slightly different format because of our special guest, but it will, in general, kind of be along those lines. Do you guys have anything to add?
So tomorrow, Nipul Mehta is visiting us, who's the founder of Service Space, and we'll be having this Awaken Circle here. And the idea of the circle is to empower everybody from different traditions in the world to sit together in silence and sharing through all their different spaces that they come from, and just to come together in unity.
So tomorrow it will be 7 p.m. Right. Okay, so thank you.
Thank you very much.